What would Martin Luther King say if he saw this? If he were there that night in 2023, when Little Simz's name was announced as the winner at the BRIT Awards, he wouldn't smile as if he thought the world was changing. Not in that easy way. He would look in silence, paying attention, because he would know what would come next. He would know that once again, what bothers people is not the trophy in hand, but the color of the hand holding the trophy. You notice this, don't you? She wins. And almost instantly the noise starts, a kind of noise that doesn't shout but hums, disguised. It enters the comments, the implications, the biased air of those who insist on asking if she deserved it. You hear it. She's not all that. It's marketing. She only won because she's a woman, because she's black. As if talent were an exception, as if existing were a favor. Martin Luther King would say that this scene is not new, that the victory of a black person still comes with suspicion. That society still needs to justify to itself why it allowed a black woman to rise so high. Because that's it. The doubt isn't about the prize, it's about the place she occupies. And more importantly, about where she came from. Little Simz is British, yes, but for many, it's not enough. Because the idea of British, like so many other ideas you know well, still carries a specific face. And it's not hers, it's not yours, and so even with the statuette in hand, she needs to prove herself once again. She needs to explain her own talent. She needs to justify her own existence on that stage. Martin Luther King would say that this has a name. It doesn't need to shout to be racism. It doesn't need explicit slurs. Just doubt is enough. Just discomfort is enough. Just this almost invisible movement of belittling with questions, of putting a but after congratulations, of placing a question mark where there should be an applause. And you feel this in your skin, don't you? Have you ever walked into a room and realized you needed to prove that you were there on merit? Have you ever had to say twice what others say once? Have you felt that when you succeed, someone looks for a reason for your victory that isn't your ability? Little Simz didn't ask for permission. She arrived with a firm voice, with sharp lyrics, with presence. She made art with her whole being. But still, there were those who said she was only there out of convenience. Those who saw her award as a political gesture, not as the recognition of undeniable talent. This isn't an opinion, it's a symptom. It's the reflection of a system that, even if it doesn't want to admit it, still finds the presence of black people in high places strange. Martin Luther King would say that the problem was never the lack of ability. It has always been the excess of barriers. Barriers that aren't just made of unjust laws, but of judgmental looks, of doors that open less often, of voices that fall silent when they should defend. The structural racism he denounced so much is still here, not with the visible whip, but with the silence that corrodes, with the ironic laughter, with the discredited award. You've felt it too, haven't you? That feeling that even when everything goes right, someone is waiting for you to fail. That your victory will bother more than any of your mistakes. That it isn't enough to do it right. You have to do more, do better, do perfectly. Because any breach is an excuse to push you back to the bottom, and then you ask yourself, until when? Martin Luther King said that justice doesn't come on its own. That it is a construction, a daily effort, a confrontation, and that the worst isn't the direct attacks but the indifference, the comfort of those who say this is an exaggeration, who see racism and prefer not to name it. Simz won. But what comes after the victory reveals more about the world than about her. The discomfort reveals the system, the doubt reveals the prejudice. And the silence reveals the fear of facing the fact that racism is still alive, disguised as opinion, criticism, or technical analysis. Martin Luther King would say that racism is clever. It learns to hide. It learns to wear new clothes. But it doesn't change its essence. It continues trying to convince you that you're not worth enough, that you're not as good as, that you're occupying a space that should belong to someone else. And you're tired of this, I know, because you know what it's like to carry this weight. You know what it's like to be disbelieved. You know what it's like to be judged before being heard. And that's why when you see what they did to Little Simz, it touches you, because it's another chapter of the same book. Another attempt to reduce, to contain, to silence. And yet she continues, and you do too. Martin Luther King said that the arc of the moral universe bends toward justice, but he didn't say that it happens by itself. It takes courage to move forward even when they doubt you. It takes firmness not to bend to invisible pressure. It takes awareness to recognize that every time a black person wins, it's still a political act, it's still a challenge, it's still resistance. You understand this because you feel this, and you know it's not just about Simz. It's about all the times black victory was met with discomfort. It's about how many doors were closed even before attempting. It's about everything you've experienced without anyone noticing. And that's why Martin Luther King wouldn't just applaud the award. He would applaud the resistance. He would applaud what can't be bought or awarded. He would applaud what she represents, the undeniable presence, the strength that doesn't bend, the response that doesn't ask for permission. You know, because deep down it's about you too. And that is exactly where the urgency lies. Martin Luther King would never tell you to wait, to lower your head, or to ignore when they mock your worth. He never believed in this strategic silence, because silence, when it comes from the oppressed, is just another form of oppression that the system has invented. It's a disguise. It's a trap. It's a prison without a lock, without chains, but still a prison. That's why when a black woman conquers a space like the one Little Simz has conquered and sees her name tarnished by doubts and insinuations, it's not just about her. It's about everyone who has been called exaggerated for pointing out racism. It's about every black person who has learned to take a deep breath before responding. Martin Luther King knew that you don't have to be lynched to experience racism. You don't have to be blocked from entering to feel the wall. He understood that the hardest thing to face is not the blatant hatred, but the perverse logic that acts as if it's fair. He knew that racism is cunning, and that part of its power lies precisely in the way it presents itself as common sense. When they say that she won for other reasons, they are also saying that her effort is worth less. They are saying that her work was only recognized due to pressure, not excellence. They are saying that she occupies a borrowed place, which can be taken back at any moment. They are saying that everything she has built can be dismantled with a single doubt. This is a type of racism that Martin Luther King would denounce without hesitation. He would call it symbolic violence, the kind that leaves no marks on the body, but tears from within. That doesn't stain the ground with blood, but empties the spirit. That isn't shouted, but whispered under the guise of criticism. And if you remain silent in the face of this, the system wins twice. You win when you deny your place, and you win when you make yourself believe that it's not worth fighting for it. Martin Luther King said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and what happened to Little Simz may have been on a British stage, but it echoes in every place where a black person finds themselves diminished by their success. The problem isn't that she won. The problem is that she won even with the world trying to convince her from the beginning that she couldn't. The problem is that she got there, and that forces many people to look at their own prejudice, the prejudice they don't admit to, the prejudice that hides behind arguments, supposed technical analyses and attempts at neutrality. Martin Luther King was never neutral, because he knew that neutrality in an unjust system is choosing the side of the oppressor. Have you ever felt what it's like to have to justify your own competence? Have you noticed how your presence alone sometimes makes people uncomfortable? Have you noticed that even being the best in the room, they still look at you as if you were an exception? Martin Luther King would look you in the eye and tell you, you are not an exception. You are proof that the lie they invented is collapsing. Little Simz's victory is dangerous to them because of this, because it breaks the narrative. It shows that it's possible to be black, talented, a woman, and occupy center stage. And that in a system that survives on exclusion is intolerable. Not because of her quality, but because of the symbol she becomes. And you know, because you also carry this symbol. Every time you take a stand, every time you occupy a space without apologizing, every time you show that racism can try, but it cannot dim the shine of someone who knows their own worth. Martin Luther King would not just see an artist in Little Simz, he would see a seed of everything he himself dreamed of, a world where skin color is not a criterion for judgment, but also a world where racism is not hidden, disguised, diluted in statements that try to seem normal. He would say that we need to name what is happening. We need to lay it bare, we need to make it uncomfortable, because as long as it's comfortable, racism survives. You understand this? Because you have had to deal with the discomfort of realizing that your victory comes with more weight. That recognition is never just recognition. That, in your case, it always comes with a despite. Despite your origin, despite your tone of voice, despite your hair, despite your story. Martin Luther King would tell you that you no longer need to succeed despite. You need to succeed because of your struggle, because of your courage, because of the strength that comes from every no you have heard and transformed into a yes. He would tell you that the system will never admit how much it fears you, because a black woman who succeeds is a threat. A black man who leads is a danger. A conscious black youth is a revolution. And that's why every time you stand up, someone tries to pull you down with doubt, with irony, with supposed impartiality. But Martin Luther King did not believe in impartiality in the face of injustice. He believed in taking a stand, in choice, in truth. And the truth is that Little Simz deserved to be there, just as you deserve to be where you are, just as many others deserve to be and are not, because they still live the daily erasure of a society that pretends not to see how unequal it is. Martin Luther King would denounce this forcefully. He would not choose gentle words, he would call it by name, because until it is named, it cannot be healed. You've had to swallow your words, you've had to make yourself small. You've had to stay silent to avoid seeming aggressive. You've had to carry the burden of doubt that wasn't yours. And because of this, when you see someone like Simz going through the same thing even after winning, it touches a place that few people understand. But Martin Luther King would understand. He would know that the prize doesn't erase the pain. That recognition doesn't cancel out exclusion. That visibility often only highlights how far we still have to go for true equality. He would tell you not to accept praise that comes with poison, not to celebrate a victory that needs to be justified, not to get comfortable in a place where you still need to prove your worth. He would tell you to stand up, to keep going, because each step you take is a step he dreamed of, because the freedom he dreamed of wasn't just about breaking chains, but about being recognized as worthy, as capable, as a legitimate part of the whole. And when doubt comes, it tries to destroy this. It doesn't attack the victory, it attacks the worth, it questions the merit. It wants to make you doubt yourself, but you won't. Because you know the history, because you carry the memory, because you are the living answer to everything they said couldn't be done. Martin Luther King believed that pain needs to transform, that it needs to turn into action, that it needs to be used as fuel, not as a burden. And that's why if he were here, he would speak not only of Simz, he would speak of you, of your journey, of how hard it is to resist every day without becoming bitter, of how hard it is to keep your head up when everything tries to shrink you. He would recognize you. He would see in you the reflection of what he stood for, and he would ask you not to give up. Because the struggle isn't just in the streets, it's also in the rooms, on the stages, on social media, in daily conversations. The struggle is in every space where they try to convince you that you don't belong. And you do belong. Martin Luther King would say that belonging is your right, not by concession, not by kindness, but because you built it, because you resisted, because you know who you are even when they try to disfigure you with words. And perhaps the hardest part of all is to maintain tenderness, to keep believing in justice even when it seems far away, to continue seeing humanity even in those who try to dehumanize you. But Martin Luther King would say that this is the true power, the power of not becoming like what you fight against. So, keep going. Even when they question you, even when they try to belittle you, even when it seems not worth it. Because every time you don't retreat, the world takes a step closer to what he dreamed. And every time you occupy a place and stay there, you break another part of the system that was made for you to never get there. And you did get there, just like Simz got there. And it's not doubt that will take you out. It's not someone else's discomfort that will stop you. Because as Martin Luther King said, dignity is not asked for, it is exercised. You know what weighs the most? It's not the silence after the conquest. It's the echo of the questioning, that which haunts you even when everything went right. That doubt that doesn't come from within, but they try to implant in you as if it were yours, as if it were natural to doubt when a black person succeeds. And the worst part is that sometimes you almost believe it, because it gets tiring. Because it's subtle, because it repeats so much it starts to seem normal. But it's not. It never was. It's not normal to have to explain your talent. It's not normal to need to prove what has already been done. It's not normal to live with the fear of being questioned all the time. It's not normal for a black victory to become an argument, to fuel cowardly theories about quotas, favoritism, politics. You feel this. It's not an opinion. It's a knot in your chest. It's a discomfort that doesn't go away. And it shouldn't go away either. Martin Luther King would not remain silent about this. He would look at you firmly and say, don't accept it, don't swallow it, don't settle. Because every time you stay silent, the structure breathes a sigh of relief. And you know it doesn't want to change, it just wants to wear you down enough to give up. It wants you to doubt yourself because it's easier to deal with people who don't believe in their own strength. But you know you got this far on merit, through struggle, through competence, through everything that no one handed to you for free. You've already overcome sideways glances, closed doors, unfair comparisons. You've carried the weight of the expectation of failure on your shoulders, and still, you kept going. So why, after all this, do they still try to make you feel smaller? Why, even at your peak, do they want to push you to the bottom? This has a name, and you need to have the courage to call it by its name. Racism, not the blatant kind with harsh words, but the other kind, the kind that hides in irony, in empty analysis, in the coldness of numbers that tell no story. The racism that operates with a false veneer of fairness, that judges the body before the performance, that questions the victory of someone who has already proven everything. This is the most dangerous kind, because it's the kind that many people don't even notice. And you've experienced it so many times that you can recognize it from a distance. You've noticed how doubt doesn't appear when victory has the right face, how criticism is only harsh when the trophy changes color, how black victory needs to justify itself even before the thank you speech. This is no coincidence, this is structure. It's a system, it's an old practice. And Martin Luther King already warned, racism reinvents itself. And when we don't point it out, it settles in. So listen to me. You have the right to be indignant. You have the right to respond. You have the right to not accept that your presence is treated as an exception or a favor. Because it isn't. You have the right to exist fully, without needing to ask for permission, without having to explain yourself every time. And if someone is uncomfortable with that, the problem was never yours. Do you really think that everything happening with Little Simz is an isolated case? Do you truly believe that this only happens to those in the spotlight? Or is it possible that somehow this affects you as well? Have you silently had your achievements looked upon with suspicion? Have you been applauded with a hidden but at the corner of someone's mouth? Because what Simz experienced wasn't about music. It was about identity. It was about resistance. It was about what happens when someone who wasn't supposed to be there stays. And Martin Luther King always knew the system's biggest fear isn't that we yell. It's that we stay, that we conquer, that we thrive and continue. So, if you've felt this way, now is the time. Now you decide whether you will allow this cycle to pass unnoticed, or if you will be part of the movement that disturbs not because of skin color, but because of the strength not to be silent. Because silence, the one that settles after doubt, is what weakens the most. And I ask you directly, will you remain silent? Will you accept that your presence is constantly put to the test? Will you keep pretending that it's all just a coincidence? Or will you look in the mirror and recognize that your story is greater than any disguised criticism? Martin Luther King would leave you with a choice, not a mission, not a burden, a choice. The choice not to be shaped by what is expected of you. The choice to rise, even when it seems like everything is conspiring to push you down. The choice not to accept that racism continues to disguise itself as normality. If this has happened to you, comment, "I needed to hear this." If you feel that you carry this weight without ever having talked about it, now is the time. Share this with someone who needs to understand, because when you speak, you liberate, and when you share, you strengthen. Does it make sense to you so far? Then leave a yes in the comments, because this is not just about what they did to Little Simz. It's about everything they have ever done to you, and you could never say it out loud until now.